The Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Physician Computer Company, PCC empowers independent pediatricians, streamlining daily operations and improving financial stability. A trusted pediatric partner for 40 years, we offer award-winning support, personalized training, seamless data transitions, and practice analytics. With inclusive pricing, a lively peer community, and a free annual users conference, you can focus on what matters the most, your patients. Explore more at pcc.com. That is pcc.com. OP is the market's only pediatric certified EHR and practice management platform designed for the clinical, operational, and financial needs of pediatric practices. Committed to reducing the complexity of running a pediatric practice, OP offers services that independent pediatricians need to grow and easily manage their business. For more information, visit officepracticum.com. Good morning, George. It's Tuesday morning, and look who we have here, one of my heroes.
Yes, today we have a repeat guest, Dr. Paul Offit, and he has a very wonderful topic. It's going to be about his book, Tell Me When It's Over, An Insider's Guide to Deciphering COVID Myths and Navigating Our Post-Pandemic World, which we all live within. I guess this is like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Dr. Offit, welcome back. And of course, the most important things are always, how's the grandbaby?
Oh, she's great. She's almost a year old. Could not be cuter. It's just so much fun.
Oh, well, you saw her over the holidays?
Yeah, though, she came down here a couple weeks ago. She's going to come back again for the birthday, which is coming up in February.
Does she like the sand of the beach, or is she scared of the sand? My son was scared of the sand and the grass until he was like 2. He wouldn't put his feet down.
No, we place an apple on it. She pretty much eats the sand off the beach, so she's not scared of it.
And have you recovered from the Eagles implosion?
No, I haven't. I've been a sports fan my whole life. I have never seen a team drop dead as fast and hard as they did this year. They were 10-1, and then they just stopped playing. It's amazing.
You know what they reminded me of? The PALS course, where they teach you that children can go, and then all of a sudden all the systems go down and they crash. And you never want to see that happen. But that's what happened. That's what the Eagles did. They acted like a child in shock.
Exactly. That's what happened.
Yes. We have a new book coming out. When I say we, is you have a new book coming out. And we can't wait to read it. But before we get to the book, I want to touch on something that has been a great concern of yours. And it seems like, unfortunately, it's playing out. What's going on with the measles outbreak in the U.S. and the UK? What is happening?
So let me put that in perspective. So the CDC, just about a week ago, put out an advisory to all basically healthcare professionals saying, be aware of the fact that there are measles outbreaks. So there have been outbreaks in Philadelphia that we had just a few weeks ago. Delaware and New Jersey in 2022, there was a big outbreak in Columbus, Ohio. So what's happening? Give me a few minutes. I'm going to answer this question. Let's go back to the beginning. The first vaccine was in 1963. The last best vaccine was in 1968. But before those vaccines, to put this in perspective, every year there were 3 to 4 million cases of measles in this country. There were about 50,000 hospitalizations and 500 deaths. And when people died, they died of pneumonia and they died of dehydration and less commonly of encephalitis. So now we had a vaccine. And then in 1971, we combined that vaccine with the mumps and rubella vaccine. And we went from about 25 states with school vaccine mandates to 40. And the story here, I think the key to the whole story of measles is school mandate. So we went from 25 to 40 states that had school mandates. So it was good, but they weren't enforced. And so you had a huge outbreak in Alaska in 1976 where 7,500 unvaccinated children were not allowed back to school until they got vaccinated. They did. The outbreak ended. The following year, 77, Los Angeles County, 50,000 unvaccinated children were not allowed back into school until they got vaccinated because of that outbreak. They did. The outbreak ended. By 81, all 50 states had school vaccine rates, because this is the key to the story, all 50 states. And the incidence dropped to about 80% of the number of cases compared to all. But one dose wasn't enough, as it turned out. One dose recommendation gave you about 93% protective efficacy. And then you saw between 89 and 91 in this country, we had 50,000 cases, 11,000 hospitalizations, and six deaths. In Philadelphia alone, 1991, we had 1,400 cases of measles and 9 deaths. People were scared to come into the city. Say, I am scared about measles if that's not coming true. I was less scared of COVID side of measles because it is so contagious. Okay, so 1991, second dose recommendation. And because of that, by the year 2000, we eliminated measles from the United States. An amazing accomplishment, right? The most contagious of the vaccine-preventable diseases was eliminated from this country. It would still come in from other countries, but it wouldn't spread from one American child to the next because we had a high rate of immunization. And two things happened. The second of which was more worrisome than the first. The first was Andrew Wakefield, who in 1998 published a paper claiming falsely that the measles and mumps rubella vaccine caused autism. That wasn't true. 18 studies showed that wasn't true. But the thing that's happening now is COVID. What COVID did was when we mandated COVID vaccine, when we made it so that people couldn't go to the bars they wanted to go to, or sporting events they wanted to go to, or religious services they wanted to go to, or children weren't able to go to school, or people weren't able to go to the universities.
You couldn't even go to the beach. They cordoned off the beach. The safest place that you could go walk, they cordoned it off with police tape. Do not enter, police tape. What nonsense.
Only Chris Christie could go to the beach. So what ended up happening then was I think we leaned into this year libertarian left too. People were upset about it. And that's spilled over into mandates in general, including school mandates. So now you have a New York Times piece looking at a Kaiser Family Foundation polling showed that 35% of American parents don't think that there should be any school mandates. And you saw that publication by CDC in November of last year showing that the number of states where there's been 5% or greater of exemptions, philosophical exemption of vaccines is now at an all-time high. So I'm worried about this because if school mandates start to erode, measles will come back, get to 1,000 cases of measles a year, and you will start to see measles deaths again.
And the problem there is that there's two types of vaccines for children, in my mind, right? So they're the ones that we not only vaccinate to protect them, but we vaccinate them to prevent epidemics in our communities. Measles is a perfect example. The hepatitis B, the HPV vaccines, they don't really spread in epidemics, but they protect you from horrendous diseases. And I think people lack of trust in the physician community today and in the politicians is huge in the exam room. And people are no longer willing to take my advice. And they don't want to see these vaccines that don't prevent epidemics in school mandated anymore.
Yeah, it used to be in the old days, you can tell them what they should get. And if they didn't want it, they used to have some kind of a reason, some kind of a story. You could get some kind of an intelligent dialogue going on and maybe convince them. Now it's talk to the hand. I don't want it. That's it. No reason. I don't want it.
They don't want to have the discussion. They see me as an extension of Pfizer, Fauci, and the White House. Right. And not someone that's going to do best for their child. And even at the Thanksgiving table, that's what I got. You doctors lied to me. I didn't lie to you. I didn't make these mandates. I had no power to control what people in DC, the CDC, FDA do. I'm just trying to give you the best advice, one kid at a time, based on what they're telling me that their data is and what they're recommending. But the pushback is really hard. And I think you noted that in a recent article that the rates of immunizations have dropped significantly.
Yeah. I don't know, Dr. Offit, if I ever told you this story, but I can tell you for a fact that if you have one dose of measles and you work in the emergency room when there's an epidemic of measles going on, you know what's going to happen to you? You're going to get measles. I got it as an intern in 1996. I was admitted to the hospital for 2 weeks. Nobody knew what I had. They were thinking all these weird esoteric diseases. That's what one of my classmates came in to visit me. He says, "Oh, you look like all those children that we have on the ward with dehydration, encephalitis, pneumonias, everything that you talked about. So you need the measles vaccine."
Yeah.
I'm a child of the 50s. I had measles. I think everybody ever.
But I shouldn't have had the measles, but I did because I was of the generation where they required, I think it was, you could get one, but you should get two, and it was paper charts, and I don't know what happened. They took titers for the residency program, and the folder came in on July 4th weekend. Nobody looked at my titers. Nobody gave me a booster. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, epidemic in New Jersey, I got the measles. I got admitted for 2 weeks. It was terrible.
This is a real problem. It's a real problem. I don't know how we're going to get this cat back in the bag.
Yep.
So why did you decide to write this book?
I think in the subtitle, the second word of the subtitle, I think explains. So the subtitle was An Insider's Guide to Deciphering COVID Myths and Navigating Our Post-Pandemic World. When COVID entered the human population in late 2019 and then started to kill people as early as late February of 2020 in this country, in April of 2020, Francis Collins, who was head of the National Institutes of Health, put together a group of a couple dozen people, experts in the fields of virology, immunology, vaccine development. It was called the ACTIV, ACTIV, Accelerating COVID Technological Innovations in Vaccines. So we served as a group to advise pharmaceutical companies on things like the antivirals and vaccines and make tests. And then I am a voting member on the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee. And so in December of 2020, when the first vaccine was created, we were the ones who had to look through all those data and to recommend authorization. So I sort of had a frontline view as to what happened during this pandemic. And I think we did a lot of things right, but not everything. We definitely did some things that were wrong. And I think watching that up close was hard. And I think this book in many ways was a catharsis for me to just get out there the things I think we did right, the things I didn't think we did, where to go here.
And you've written about this, and I think you're going to write in the book about this. Should scientists openly debate vaccine policies?
Yes, I think they should. I think we can reasonably do that because we should try and trust the American public. They can understand all this. I understand, as you said earlier, we live in a much more cynical, litigious, divisive time. And you're either on the bus or off the bus. And the minute that you, in any sense, criticize or challenge a public health recommendation, you're off the bus or a bad guy. Certainly through that to some extent. But I think you have to do that. See, the thing that's interesting to me is, as a scientist, I spent 25 years of my life working on the virus, rotavirus, right? Trying to understand what parts of the virus made you sick, what parts of the virus induced an immune response that was protective. Ultimately, we were able to be part of a team. I was able to be part of a team at Children's Hospital Philadelphia, created a vaccine, Rotavirus. And when you would present it at national meetings, you would have a conclusion. You would draw a conclusion based on your study. And that would be challenging. Could you draw that conclusion? Did you do the right kinds of studies? Was it internally consistent? Was it robust? Was it reproducible? You wanted that in because that made for better sense. That does not, well, the public health. It does. So, for example, in July of 2021, so after the vaccine had been out for about, there was an outbreak in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Thousands of men get together, celebrate the July 4th holiday, about 80% were vaccinated. Nonetheless, there was a COVID outbreak. 346 men who were vaccinated got, at that point, 2 doses of the vaccine, got COVID. 4 were hospitalized, 4 of 346. So that's a hospitalization rate of 1.2%. That is great. That is a vaccine working well. The remaining 342 had an asymptomatic or mild infection, which the CDC in their report, morbidity and mortality report, labeled breakthrough infections. Wrong word. Breakthrough implies failure. That wasn't a failure. That was suggested. So what we did inadvertently, we created a false expectation of what this vaccine could do. Because the goal of the vaccine was to protect you against severe disease, keep you out of the hospital, keep you out of the ICU, keep you out of the morgue. The goal is not to protect against mild disease because that's not possible for this virus, a short incubation period in mucosal disease virus like influenza, like respiratory syncytial virus. That's what this virus is. And so we created this false expectation. It's just a terrible job at communication. And so that was just one of, I think, several examples. The bivalent vaccine was another.
So
Vaccine 6 months of age was not something any other country does. So why are we doing it? Those sorts of things.
So I'm going to interrupt you a little bit because what I recall about the polio vaccine, which is a great example, I don't think anybody can argue against the polio vaccine. I'm sure someone does, but polio does not prevent disease. It prevents paralytic polio. And we forget that. And we don't see, thank God, any more kids in the iron lung or with those braces with a limb that doesn't work. And we don't see death from polio. But the vaccine doesn't stop you from getting a fever in the middle of the summer. It just stops you from being paralyzed, which is a huge win. So that was what I call an unforced error. We knew that there are vaccines like hepatitis B, extremely rare vaccine, prevents you from getting hepatitis B. You don't get infected. You don't get liver cancer. And then there's the other infectious vaccines like polio that you may get the virus in your nose, but you don't end up with the bad outcomes. And COVID was one of those diseases. And in the beginning, it was sold to us as it stops you from getting the cold, stops you from transmitting the virus and landing in the hospital.
When they make these recommendations and these statements, they're doing it in a scientific way, trying to explain it to me as a physician where I understand it. But the parent, they see it as you take a shot, you prevent an illness and you don't get sick. That's what we see. That's what parents see.
No, the endpoints of these studies where whether you end up in the hospital or the ICU.
They see, I don't get the disease. That's what they hear from us.
No, that's what we heard from the marketing machines when they put out the COVID vaccine. And that wasn't true. And that's why people are telling me that I don't tell them the truth about vaccines.
I always knew that the COVID vaccine lessened the severity of the illness, and the job of the vaccine was to keep you from getting sick, going to the hospital, and dying, and preventing the spread to other people. People heard it as
preventing the spread to other people, which it doesn't do. Okay, that's what the problem is. This is not like measles, where you can get to 95, 97% herd immunity. No one gets measles in that community.
I know, but this is the discussion that's very difficult for parents to understand, because I guess it could prevent an illness if enough people get the vaccine. And they did try to say that, but people just don't understand that.
It's simple.
I understand that as a physician. What do you think, Dr. Outfit?
Here's what I would say. There's a short incubation period viruses and the long incubation period viruses. For a long incubation period virus like measles or rubella, where it takes 10, 11, 12, 14 days, all you need is immunological memory, because there's plenty of time for activation and differentiation of those memory cells, like memory B cells and memory T cells, to prevent you from even having a mild infection. It's true. For these short incubation period diseases, remembering that antibodies in your circulation only last 4 to 6 months before they'll. And those antibodies in your circulation mild disease for the most part. And it takes a while to develop severe infection. For SARS-CoV-2, for COVID, it takes a while. It takes a couple of weeks. That's why you're protected against severe disease, because all you need is memory, and memory is generally long-lasting. So I think that's where people got confused. And I would say this though: if you get a COVID vaccine and then you're exposed to the virus, you do lessen the degree to which you are shedding infectious virus, but you don't eliminate it. You lessen the degree to which you are missing a virus, but you don't eliminate it. And I think when we mandated these vaccines, I think we created this notion that this was like bulletproof, that the virus was going to bounce off you. It doesn't work that way. And it's hard to do that. It's a nuanced message. And I think for some people, a nuanced message means a garbled message. But I do think you have to trust the American people to do that, because otherwise what happens? You watch somebody like Ron DeSantis when he was talking in Iowa. He said, quote, they told us these vaccines were going to work, but they didn't. And what he means by that is his sense was that this vaccine would protect you against even a mild infection for years, which is not possible for this kind of virus. And we didn't explain that.
All we have to say is, this is like the polio vaccine. It doesn't really matter. You get a little fever in the summer. You're not going to end up with a kid who's paralyzed in an ICU. That we have been doing since the 1950s. and the parents understand it. That's it. It's a very simple message. But the problem really, in my mind, started when people tried to push back from the public health community, like the Great Barrington Declaration. And there was a quick push to silence them and get them out of the public space. We did not have the ability to have this conversation amongst people that are actually very well versed on these issues and then communicate to the American people. The American people are not that dumb. And the result of that is the message was too monochromatic, too rigid, and people started not believing what we were saying. And when I say we are, because we all got lumped in with the same, whoever was in the White House, whoever was in charge of the policy, we are all subservient to them, and we don't have independent minds that think independently according to the population right now. That hurts my ability to persuade people to do the right thing in the examiner. It really does. What do we know about immunity induced by natural infection?
As a general rule of thumb, it's as you expect. True for measles or mumps or rubella or any of the other chickenpox, any of the other viral infections get out there. It does induce the same kind of protection, if not arguably better, and I'll tell you why better in a second. It induces levels of antibodies that will then protect you against mild disease for 4 to 6 months. And it induces high frequencies of memory B and T cells that will protect you likely against severe disease for a while. The advantage of a natural, assuming you live, the advantage of a natural infection is that you make an immune response to all 4 proteins. You're not just responding to the one protein from the vaccine. And the advantage to that is that we always talk about B cells and antibodies, but there's another part of your immune system, T cells, which are important. T cells, cytotoxic T cells, kill virus-infected cells. And they also are important in protecting against severe disease. And the part of the virus that these cells recognize, so-called cytotoxic T cells, is not really the as much the fusion protein, the spike protein. It's another protein called the nucleoprotein. And that protein is really conserved from the original strain, the ancestral strain, or Wuhan 1 strain, up to the current strain, the N1 strain. That protein remains invariant. That's why even if you were just immunized with the Wuhan 1 strain, you got, say, 2 or 3 doses of the Wuhan 1 strain, you're still, for the most part, protected against severe disease, assuming you're a relatively healthy younger person, because you have those frequencies, high frequencies of memory T cells directed against a conserved region of the virus. And on I'm on the FDA's Vaccine Advisory Committee, and we always, every meeting say, let's talk about T cells. Let's have T cell biologists also present, because all we ever talk about are antibodies, and that's just one part of this.
Yeah, and then also one of the things that's very hard to understand and very hard to explain in the exam, because people have memories, is if I already had COVID, why do I need another vaccine?
You can, I talk about this a little bit in the book. This is kind of when it's over the book, because I have a whole book to explain it. If I don't have to do it like on a 4-minute help spot. I think that in February 2020, there was a group of 4 people who were asked to participate in a discussion night by Zoom on whether or not we thought natural infection should count as being vaccinated. In other words, was it good enough? And I was of the opinion there was, that you should mandate vaccines for people who've already been naturally infected. But nonetheless, the group that was representing the government decided to move forward with this, largely, I think, for reasons, bureaucratic reasons. That, you would have to prove natural infection, which means you would have to prove that, say, you had an antibody response against a protein other than the spike protein. That just seemed, because we had enough bureaucratic hurdles as it was, did we want to add another one? Wouldn't it just be easy to get a vaccine? And frankly, when you get the vaccine, if you've been naturally infected, you're just boosting immunity. There's no downside. It's a good thing. But does natural infection protect? Yes, I do talk about that linked in the book so people can understand it.
And that was interesting to me because I had 3 shots at COVID, and I've gotten COVID twice. And I get lower respiratory infection. And you recently wrote an article in your Substack pages, I think, about the journey of President Trump, and what really saved him were the steroids. And I've been scratching my head. What do I need? Do I need to give myself booster of COVID vaccine every 3 months, every quarter at random, just so that I don't even get mild disease. Because I really cough and I wheeze and it's a whole week ordeal and it's just miserable. And when I read that, I realized this is a problem I've had all my life. I have a very wacky immune system. So the virus is not doing any harm to me. It's all the inflammation my body likes to make every time I smell pollen or dust or a virus gets in my nose. And there's nothing I can do about it. Just when I get COVID, and I'm going to get it every year probably, I'm going to have to do what I did, take the Paxlovid, get the albuterol inhaler, and take 20 milligrams of prednisone for 10 days to lessen my immune system craziness.
Sounds like you have asthma with the viral superinfection and so forth.
Yeah.
Triggering asthma.
But it's horrible. But the vaccine is working. I honestly believe that without the vaccine, had I gotten COVID, I would end up in the ICU for 6 weeks in diapers and then off to a nursing home to recover my muscle mass. And I told my dad this, and I said, Dad, if I get COVID, I do not want to be intubated. Let me go. I don't want that. I don't want to be in a nursing home. And I'm a young guy, but it is it's without a vaccination, with my reactive airway disease, it's a death sentence.
Yeah, completely. For one thing, you make the important point that there are two phases, which is the first phase is the viral replication. When giving in the first few days, when you take the antiviral, it's good because the virus is king at that point. Or monoclonal antibodies, the kinds of things that would work early in illness. But later in illness, when the second phase, when the virus replication is not as important and the immune response takes over, that's when it's like immunosuppressive for someone who's more severely ill. But it is tricky to take steroids in the first part of the illness because you're suppressing an important immune response. Then you have asthma, so it's a different story. But I think hopefully people are left with the notion they should take steroids in the first few days of illness because it's an important part of their immune response to put them over with the infection.
And I don't think that works for everybody, right? That works for me because I have that reactive airway disease and seasonal allergies. So I need more. I have a wacky immune system. I'm the one that goes out for a walk on the beach and I get these huge whelps all over my leg where the mosquitoes got me. And everybody else has nothing, and I itch for the next week and a half. Putting hydrocortisone cream on the whelps.
Hey, you're just wacky. You're just wacky.
Yeah, it's just I have very sweet blood. That's why they come after me. Pediatric Executive Development System, or PEDS, is a dynamic, transformative program designed to accelerate the growth and development of the leaders in the field of pediatric entrepreneurship. PEDS takes a hands-on approach to problem solving, addressing real-time situations within your organization. More than a theoretical course, it is a practical platform that accelerates learning. Look at our link on the show notes for more information. Tell Me When It's Over, an insider's guide to deciphering COVID myths and navigating our post-pandemic world by Dr. Paul Offit. As you all know, Dr. Offit is one of the world's top virologists. The book will be released February 13th, and it is available on Amazon. You can find a link to buy the book on the show notes. And then boosters. Does everybody need a booster every 3 months, once a year, maybe never?
So here's what I would say. I think that the technology around it has morphed. So what was the term booster has morphed into sort of like a yearly campaign, more like analogous to influenza, where everybody over 6 months of age is being asked to get a yearly vaccine. I think the goal of this vaccine is to keep people out of the hospital, out of the intensive care unit, to keep them from dying. That's the goal of this vaccine. So the question then becomes, who are those people? Who is getting hospitalized? Who is going to the ICU? Who is dying? And generally, they fall into high-risk groups, like people who have comorbidities, like chronic lung disease, like heart disease, diabetes, obesity, people who are pregnant, people who are immune compromised, and people who are older, and by older, as Rochelle Walensky, when she was the CDC director, said, we would argue people over 75. In England, studies show we're like over 80. So the older, and that's really another way of saying immune compromised. When you're really older, you're just not making it. Immune response. My mother's 95. She got a booster dose of COVID. I don't think that was doing much to her. And I think were she to be exposed to the virus and develop at slow, it would be much more likely to save her life than any booster that she got. So I think that what we did in this country was we recommended that everybody over 6 months to get this updated vaccine, likening that to flu. And I think we're pretty much the only country that does that. Canada does that. Germany, France, England, and 3 Scandinavian countries, the World Health Organization, Australia, they target high-risk groups, which to me makes the most sense because I think that's really where you're going to bang for your buck. But this gets back to your earlier question. Can you say that? So I did very early on. I say that. And as a voting member of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, I had somewhat of a platform, so I'm saying that on national television. And when I did that, I was hammered by some people. They thought, here you are, you're contradicting a public health message. Some people listen to you. They're not going to be vaccinated. It's only going to make things worse. And my attitude was just, you should call it the way you see it. Well, I started to get love letters from anti-vaccine activists who were saying things like, we have been praying for you and your family for years. And then our theories are finally answered. How is this to be on Newsmax? Okay. That's when you know you're not getting your message out there.
That's funny. You on Newsmax.
I wasn't.
Did you go?
I chose to go, and I'm sure it's the last time they were ever asked me to go on that show. I think Rudy Giuliani preceded me by two people. Then right before me, there was a couple guys with AR-15s or AK-47s or whatever who were lamenting. There was congressmen who wanted to limit these weapons of mass destruction. And so they came. And what happened was the host said, now we have a doctor who doesn't seem to agree with the public health message. I thought this is going to be awful. And he had Andy Cohen headed the CDC saying, look, we're heading into the season. I think that if you should get a vaccine and to make sure that if you're sick, you should wear a mask. And if you're in high risk group, you should get a vaccine. And so then he goes, and they say, I'm sure this doctor would have something about that, expecting everyone to contradict the public health message. I said, no, I think that goes about right. And said, I think if you're in high risk group, you should get it then. And that's exactly what they didn't want to hear. And then he said, but it's much better to be naturally infected, isn't it? I said, yeah, as long as you live through it.
Yeah. That does remind me of something that I read, which bothered me a little bit. And it was that a lot of public health experts advocated for prioritizing that vaccine when it first came out to nursing homes and the elderly, and not the healthcare workers, because those were the people that were having the worst outcomes and dying. And we chose to give it to young healthcare workers who are very low risk first, because like the airplane theory, in case of an emergency, put the mask over the mom first, then over the child. And looking back, maybe we won't repeat that mistake in the future. We will take care of the highest risk first and then ourselves. Don't you think that would have been okay?
Yes, it happened to me. And I was in December of 2020, right when this vaccine came out, and our hospital prioritized certain groups. And obviously they prioritized the groups on the front lines, the emergency department people, the transport people, et cetera, front lines. And I was attending. I was seeing patients in our hospital, not in the intensive care unit or in the emergency room, but I was seeing patients on floors who had COVID. I was over 70, didn't have any high-risk medical conditions, but I was not a frontline group. I couldn't wait to get that vaccine. It seemed to lie to me that I recommended authorization of the vaccine as a member of the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, but I couldn't get a vaccine in my own hospital. I did eventually get it by the end of December, and I couldn't wait to get it. Just felt like you don't want to button line. You don't want to say, look, I think I should get it because I'll go to the FDA Vaccine Advisory. You don't want to do that. So I waited. I couldn't wait to get it.
I remember at the beginning when they were doing these vaccines, they spent so much time and resources on determining whether you can or you cannot give it. And so many vaccines were wasted because they'd sit on their shelf or they'd open them up and they expired for fear of giving it to the wrong person, instead of just banging them out and just giving it to everybody. Even hospitals, they would make a whole big, with 1 million people and processes to give out 100 vaccines. We started giving the vaccines much later. in our office, we used to bang out 300 on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, let me just say this. I think there's a lot we did right and a lot we did wrong. It's always easy in retrospect. The book I talk about things we did right and wrong, and I keep offering that caveat. It's always easy. I can promise you, no one who commented on this virus and no one who commented on this disease at some point was always wrong. All of us at one point something was wrong. I feel sorry for Dr. Fauci, who was really the voice many of the public health, because there were some things he said earlier that did now being proven to be right. It didn't then mean that you can't trust anything he said. It didn't mean that at all. It just meant that you learn as you go. I think people are intolerant of that learning curve.
I know you're good friends with Dr. Fauci, and I used to be an admirer of Dr. Fauci and Dr. Pizzo. People forget that Dr. Pizzo, I never met him. I just read his papers, and George gets excited about rock bands. I get excited about infectious disease people. And I just read his papers and the work he did at NIH to stop infection in the cancer patients, probably responsible for a great majority of the success in cancer therapy today. So before I started pediatrics, the death rate for ALL was 85%. When I was a resident in the late 80s, it was 50%. And today, the survival rate's 85%. And a lot of that has to do with the way that we intervene quickly with infections in kids who are immunosuppressed during treatment for cancer. But when you say things like, yeah, and this is a quote of Fauci in the Wall Street Journal, yeah, I knew that the vaccine mandates for COVID could increase vaccine hesitance, but the whole point of it is to make it really difficult for people not to get the vaccine. And you say that out loud as a leader of not only physicians, but also as a public health leader and as part of the government. That really, I know he's not perfect, but that really should have never been said.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you saw a recent interview with Francis Collins, who was head of the NIH, but he pretty much said, what he said, not criticizing Dr. Fauci specifically, but that we as a public health community were focused solely on public health. And so you can understand it at some level. In 2020, you'd have 2,000 people dying a day, 3,000 people dying. Hospitals were overburdened. They couldn't take care of it. Because we were so overburdened. And then we would admit patients who had chosen not to be vaccinated and were admitting them to the ICU. It was overwhelming and awful to watch, especially in the pediatric world. So I understand it, but should we have closed schools? Probably not. Should we have been this heavy-handed with regard to mandates? And I'll tell you, I was when Rosalynn Carter died, I was to her memorial service at the Grace Memorial Church. And I sat next to a prominent public health official who got named. But what she said to me was, I think in retrospect, we probably never should do vaccines. And although that no doubt would mean that more people died, it was her concern, the effects on that, on business, on school-aged children, and now on the general pushback on all school mandates may have done more harm than good. I do get that, but again, it's always easy in retrospect.
Okay, so I preface this by I always admired these guys. And I was trained in Costa Rica and then in Michigan and then in Chicago. And before, it would be a lot easier. And I was so terrible that as an intern in Morning Report, the attending would just say, be quiet. And then she'd say, okay, now you can rant. And my rants were about the use of ceftriaxone in the emergency room. It seemed like they gave it out like vitamin D or vitamin B12 shots for the elderly. And can't they think? The kids just got a fever. Can't you wait for the blood cultures? As they draw the blood cultures before they got to CBC, they give him an IM shot of Rocephin. What for? And I could have practiced my whole life like that. Every time I see a sinusitis, an ear infection, a possible viral pneumonia, give the kid a shot of Rocephin. What do I care? It's going to take care of it. It's going to kill every bug. It's easy. It's fast. They don't have to swallow anything. And one shot probably covers at least 3 days, and not 4 days of illness. And I'm never going to miss a meningitis. That is not how I was trained to take care of children. I was told you use the antibiotic that has the least side effects, the most specific panel for that bug, the least risk of side effects, and the least cost on the patient. Because even if you're insured by Medicaid or you have a fancy Blue Cross Blue Shield plan from IBM, we all as a society pay for those drugs. And so I wasn't just taught to say, given whatever is the most fast and expedient drug, and forget about resistant bugs in the future or the problems that you're causing, the cost or the side effects. And in that interview, Dr. Francis was quoted as saying, so you attach infinite value to stopping the disease and saving a life. You attach zero value to whether this actually totally disrupts people's lives, ruins the economy, has many kids kept out of school in a way that they will never recover. Then he explained, this is public health mindset. That was not the public mindset I was taught at Michigan, Rush, or Costa Rica. I don't know when that sipped into the public health mindset. It's always been a very sad compromise. What is the return on investment? Who can I help the most with this intervention? And who is at most risk? And who can I help? And we know this from mass casualty training. If you have an injury in a mass casualty training, you get a red tag on your toe and you're going to be allowed to peacefully die. We're going to get to the middle ones, the yellow tags that could survive, and the green tags that have minor injuries, they're not going to get any treatment either. And this wasn't taught. I went to medical school in 83. So this was taught in 83, and it was reinforced to me through 92 when I finished my training. I don't know where we went off the rails.
I don't disagree with you. What you just read was from Francis Collins, is that right?
Yes, that's an exact quote from the Wall Street Journal of what Dr. Collins said.
Yeah, I understand that. Agree.
And you understand the disappointment for me. I just told you who my heroes are these great infectious disease people, right? Like you, right? John McCracken, okay? Ralph Feigin, Philip Pizzo, okay? And to see someone like Dr. Francis Collins, which I have held in such esteem for so many years, say something like this in public, it crushed my dreams.
No, I see your point. I think in some ways, some of the things we did, the cure was worse than the disease.
Yeah, it makes me extremely sad. So I think that was the original sin. We didn't think like doctors. What can I do? What can we afford? Where can I make the biggest difference? And what do I have to accept that I can't change?
I see a lot of children and their parents are physicians. And I saw a patient and the father's wearing a jacket from one of the big hospital systems. And I had asked him, so how is life in the emergency room? He said to me, and it was very sad when I heard this, they took away my right to think like a physician. I go to work and they tell me how to practice medicine and what I should do today. That's terrible.
No, I think I still see patients, and what I find particularly frustrating is this sort of algorithmic thinking, this pathway thinking, which takes the judgment to it. You'll see, I'll give you an example. There was a study recently out of Israel where they looked at people who had complicated pneumonia, severe complicated pneumonia, ICU level. And what they did was the experimental was treat them for 2 atripral days when they were no longer febrile, or let them do what they normally do, which is to treat for some level of 7, typically, because bacteria apparently reproduce themselves based on the lunar month, 7 days, 14 days, 21 days. And so what they found, there was no difference. Because arguably you could say when a patient's febrile, the immune system is starting to back off because fever is the product of proteins in the immune system. And therefore, then it's enough. And so that's individualizing care. But we don't do that because it's so much easier, it's so much more comforting to just say, okay, here's the path, here's what I'm going to do. With cystic fibrosis patients, we had a patient come in there was a time when cystic fibrosis patients would come in and we would do a few things, which we do for everybody. Now they're going to be laid down, you're giving them IV fluids, you're giving them better test physical therapy. Do that, plus or not, antibiotics. We actually did those studies to show that antibiotics made a difference in some, but not others. And there was a child who came in fairly mild, did well, and nonetheless, wanted treated for 14 days. Why 14 days? That's not 12 days, not 11 days. Like this multiple of 7, which we're married to, because although bacteria don't reproduce themselves on the basis of undermine, we still nothing to do. So it's hard to watch. And I agree. You take the thinking out of it. You take the individual process out of it. It's hard to watch.
Yeah, it's disheartening. It's disheartening. I think as a society, we lost the ability to trust on each other and to have common sense. And we expect only perfect outcomes.
Yep.
And none of that is possible. I see it with mothers that want perfect children. No child is perfect.
I think, see, the thing, just as part of this pandemic, if you ask people, do you think we're going to know more 100 years about science and medicine? We know now everyone would say yes. But when it comes to your disease, or it comes, in this case, to our pandemic, people wanted to believe we knew everything we needed. I mean, when I was on the FDA, I'm still on the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee, when we sat down in December to look at those people, 5 to 40,000 people, during the 30,000 people. So they were placebo-controlled trials. So 20,000 people actually got the vaccine. 5 was trial, 15,000. The majority trial, that's 35,000 people that had gotten an mRNA vaccine. Okay, now this is a novel pathogen, had unusual biological characteristics, unusual clinical characteristics, which we were trying to defeat with a technology, messenger RNA, with which we had no previous experience. So you're looking at data on 35,000 people about to make recommend authorization for a vaccine that's going to be given to hundreds of millions of people. You know the other shoe is going to drop. You know you're going to find out something you didn't know yet. You know that. The only question is how rare and how severe. And that's what happened, right? You saw myocarditis as a consequence of this vaccine, which generally was short-lived, usually within 4 days of the second dose, but not always. And with J&J's vaccine, the vector virus vaccine, the adenovirus virus vaccine, you saw a more severe problem. You saw severe and occasionally fatal blood clots, which ultimately drove that vaccine off the market in May of last year. There is no medical technology that has ever been advanced where there has not been a human price to pay for knowledge. None, including the polio vaccine. None. And so you know that. But we're intolerant. We just want to believe you know everything when you don't. And you can't.
Well, I think every conversation needs to start with the fact that no matter all these miracles of science, because we really live in a great age of science, and we have great quality of life and longevity in Western societies, in rich countries. But we all get sick and we all die. That's unlikely to change. And that's just the reality of life, and it isn't fair. It just is. And that's just, you cannot take that off the table till you're actually dead. That's just part of living. And it's hard medicine. It's hard for people to hear that message, but it is the truth. And nothing's going to be perfect. Do you think they can improve the COVID vaccine in some way? Or yes?
Yes. I think we focus solely on the spike protein, the fusion protein, because that's the protein that attaches the virus to cells. And so if you make an antibody response to that protein, specifically the receptor binding domain, which is the business end of the fusion protein, then you will prevent virus cell binding, which will prevent infection. But again, this takes into account, for the most part, B cells or antibody responses only. I think that clearly there's study after study that has shown that even people who can't make a B cell response because of cancers or because of immune suppressive therapies that they're receiving, that they're still largely protected against serious disease because they can make T cells. That wouldn't make sense to have, let's say, to not only the fusion mRNA for the fusion protein, but also mRNA for the nuclear protein, which is the major recognition for T cells. It's invariant, meaning it doesn't change at all, doesn't evolve, it has not evolved over time. So why not include that? And so there are experimental studies in hamsters, like Syrian hamster, showing it provides broad, long-lasting protection, which is what people want to. I would love to see that kind of thing. So I think you can make a vaccine.
Yeah, I'm just going to be fair because you've said this many times. There may be a point when we do need boosters, even if we have been immunized, because your immune memory might have waned. We know that from other vaccines, but we have not seen that data from the CDC yet. So we're not saying as a community, don't ever consider a booster. We're saying at this moment, if you're healthy and you're not over 70, you likely don't benefit from being boosted anymore.
And that's
at this moment.
Putting it. What you need, who's getting hospitalized, who's done? One. And so concert academic immunologists in concert with epidemiologists, CDC can do the kinds of studies of saying, why are these being hospitalized? Is it because they never made a very good immune response? In what case, an antiviral would have been making sure they got it? Because a lot of people who were admitted to the hospital never took an antiviral, and even though they were in. Secondly, what is the frequency of their memory B and T cell? Has it faded? Will we get to the point where otherwise healthy young people are getting it? And is it because that's faded so that they wouldn't benefit from a booster vaccine? To have that kind of knowledge would make for a much more thoughtful approach, I think, to who gets boosted and when.
Yeah. Now, I know this is a very unfair question of you, but I'm fascinated how they're looking at these mRNA vaccines for the prevention or treatment of cancer. As a functional virologist, do you think that has some hope?
Yes, I do. You could argue that's the best future. All right, because what we learned here is you can take this messenger RNA, a piece of messenger RNA, put it in a lipid nanoparticle. So what you could do is you could take that lipid nanoparticle and target it to a cancer cell, because cancer cells can express certain proteins that are unique to that cell. You target it to that cancer cell, and then the messenger RNA makes a protein that would be readily recognized by your immune system, especially that it knocks the T cells, would kill cells. So I think that is definitely a future for this kind of technology. I think people were hoping that because this works so well for this pathogen, works so well for SARS-CoV-2, that it would work well for everything. But I think what people may not remember is the technology is not that new. People started working on mRNA vaccines in 2005 with HIV, human deficiency virus, the cause of AIDS, and with not great results. And so people are saying we can just do this now as a universal flu vaccine. We can make a better malaria vaccine, a better tuberculosis vaccine, an HIV vaccine. But I think there's other reasons for why those are so harder to make, those vaccines. I'm not sure this solves the problem. I think you could argue the best future of mRNA technology is cancer.
That would be wonderful, right? I dream of the day where young girls could get a vaccine and breast cancer would disappear like cervical cancer.
We have no answers.
No answer, but lung cancer, breast cancer, and colon cancer are the top 3 killers of an American citizen. If we could get vaccines for 1 or 2 of those and have that disappear, what a glorious day that would be for this country and this earth. So that's my hope, that mRNA technology leads to a cancer vaccine that really takes a lot of suffering out of humanity. I'm going to just ask you one, because we talked a lot about the unforced errors, breakthrough infections. We should never have said that. Stay 6 feet apart. That had no science behind it. Actually, the CDC wanted more than 6 feet, but we didn't have any studies at the time. 2 masks are better than none. Well, that's not true. We don't have any evidence that's true. Certainly an N95 mask is very efficacious when fitted properly in the right environment. But if you had used one like I've used one, I have to take it off every 30 minutes and go outside and breathe, because I start feeling short of breath and sweating underneath. And it's not a comfortable thing. And most people are not going to wear that for 8 hours a day to at work. School closures, though, that was a very difficult one. And I think it's caused a lot of harm. In retrospect, do you think, and I know where it came from, I have to preface it for those people who are not pediatricians. Every study in influenza clearly shows, please correct if I'm wrong on this, that children are the spreaders of influenza, and children do get sick with influenza. So a very logical and effective strategy to stop a pandemic of influenza is to keep the kids out of school. Interestingly enough, and this gets into conspiracy theories, the Obama-Biden administration during the H1N1 pandemic did not shut schools down, even though we're only 2 months away from the vaccine being released in the market. There was a run on the bank as far as pediatric care because of that pandemic. Adults didn't get sick. and adults didn't die from the disease. Luckily, children didn't die. They just got sick, but they got better. So it was a reasonable thought at that point when we didn't know to say, there's another respiratory virus, maybe we should close schools to stop it from being released into the community, overwhelm our hospitals, and have a lot of sick kids. But that didn't turn out to be the case. And then we pushed even harder and we kept schools closed for a long time.
No, it was an amazing year, 2020, because yes, we did. We closed schools, we restricted travel, we closed businesses, and we pretty much eliminated respiratory viruses in the United States. We saw virtually no influenza, virtually no respiratory syncytial virus. Think about, you could argue COVID, no doubt would have been much worse had we not done that. But again, we're surprised that we had it for that. It was a remarkable. I've been a private practicing, not private practicing, hospital-based pediatric infectious person for many decades. I have never seen anything like this. And we're always having with RSV in the winter. And not this, that winter, 2020, 2021, gone.
Yeah, but the strategy was wrong. Closing the schools doesn't prevent the spread of COVID, nor does it protect the high-risk people.
But there was a study done in Japan years ago where, to make your point, that when they wanted to try and decrease deaths in the elderly, the best way was actually vaccinating children who were the source.
Yes. And the children did pay a very high price for having missed those schools.
Oh, they did.
It was terrible. Now, the other thing that you talk about in the books is the vaccine adverse event reporting system and how it can be manipulated by people to misinform the public.
I think I would have guessed, let's put this in broader terms. When this virus entered this country, when it started killing people couldn't wait for there to be a vaccine. And so when the vaccine was available in December 2020, and we were vaccinating 1 million people a day, 2 million a day, 3 million a day. And then in April, May 2021, we hit a wall. 30%, 70% of the country was vaccinated, 30% wasn't, and didn't want to be. And the anti-vaccine movement really gained traction. The misinformation and disinformation in this country really gained traction. Vaccines became a dirty word, I think in part because of pushback on mandates, but just there'd never been a politics to the anti-vaccine movement. On the left, it was all natural, don't inoculate me with anything with a chemical name, sort of a manufactured residual, or buffering agent, or stabilizing agent, or an activating agent, or preservative, because I want to be natural. And on the right, it was libertarian, government off my back. It swung wildly to that side. If you lived in a county that was red, you were much more likely to be hospitalized and die from COVID than if you lived in a county that was blue. And although there's always a politics to public health because it involves resources, and resources involves at some level politics, there never was this kind of separation that people started calling it red COVID because that were much more likely to die that way, which is remarkable to me. And I think that I talk a fair amount about sort of these myths and where they came from, why they were so successful. But VAERS contributed to that. VAERS, which was created in 1986 through the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, is a way that you can just report anything you think might be a side effect, but it's misnamed. I think any reasonable person who looks at the title of that program, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, assume this is the reporting system for vaccine adverse events, but it's not. It's a reporting system for suspected vaccine adverse events, which is a very different thing. And I think we never communicated that. And people like Dr. Carlson would say, look, 3,300 people have died from COVID vaccine, according to this system. My favorite, though, is there's a physician in Portland, Oregon named Jim Miller, to prove how this system is in no sense speaking about anything, said that he had gotten the vaccine and that he turned into the Incredible Hulk. And that's even appeared in the system. There's no screening.
That reminds me of the FDA, because I used to read the package inserts before I prescribe things. I don't do it anymore. But there's a medicine for asthma called Singular. And in the package insert, it said something like 4% of patients that took Singular for asthma developed ear infections. And I just thought it was the most ridiculous statement from the government that you would ever find. We know how ear infections are caused. It's the bacteria. The fact that you have asthma, you probably have rhinitis at the same time. And there is no causality between Singular and ear infections. but they still get in the package insert as a side effect of the medication. And I was like, why do they do that? Because the rules make them do it.
It's a failure alarm. In other words, if you do a prospective placebo-controlled trial, if a side effect is reported in the same amount in the placebo group as in the vaccine group, it still ends up in the package insert.
Yeah, it's just a rule.
But you're right not to read it. It's a legal communication document, much more than it is a medical communication document.
Yes.
In a way, it's misleading.
But unfortunately, the parents get the package insert, and then they read and they're like, I don't want to give my asthmatic kid a medicine that will cause an ear infection. And that's just, we can't change that. It's just a loss. But it's funny. You have to take everything with a grain of salt. What do you think we could do to regain the trust of our patients so that without mandates, I'm not saying all mandates are wrong. I think those highly contagious viruses need mandates. There's no other way around. But what can we do to get people to trust us back in the exam room that I am not an agent of Pfizer or whoever's in the current White House? I really look after your kid's best interest, and I want to do what's best for him or her with what I know today, which may be totally wrong.
It's a very distrustful time. People have the polls that have been done looking at how much you trust, say, the CDC or you trust the FDA, have shown that there's a dramatic reduction in trust. And I think it's the culture. I think it is a cynical, litigious, divisive culture. I think you get elected. I think it's amazing to me that you'll have representatives, congressional representatives, using likely terms like deep state, that there is this conspiracy out there to do you harm, that there are deep forces out there that mean to do you harm without ever specifically talking about them, just throwing them out there as possible. And so conspiracy has become part of the mainstream. There's, of course, there are dark forces out there that mean to do you harm. And so how do you fight that? I think all you can do is try and get good information out there to talk about what you know and things you don't know. I think that's what frustrated me a little bit about this. I talk about this as a book a little, is the bivalent vaccine is a perfect example. It wasn't a terrible idea. Omicron had come into this country, the so-called BA1 strain. It was immune-evasive. The strain we were using, the Wuhan was, it really wasn't thought to do a good job at inducing antibodies, although it's C-cell. And so we thought, okay, let's give a half dose of Wuhan on a half dose of the Omicron, which ended up being BA4, BA5. That was no better than what we had. It wasn't. The immunological study showed that it wasn't better. The clinical study showed that it wasn't better. Nonetheless, you had public health officials saying you need to get this vaccine because it was better. And I called them and said, look, it's boosters boost. This is definitely of value to people who are in high risk. Don't say it's better because it's not better. And I ended up being with CNN, actually, because I'd written a perspective piece in the New England Journal of Medicine saying that, which means that I'm not the only one who thought it, because they would never accept it for publication unless it was reviewed and felt to be consistent with the data. And it appeared in the same issue as two studies, one from Columbia, one from Harvard, showing that immunologically it wasn't any better. It wasn't any worse. Boosted, it wasn't better. So it wasn't a bad idea. It just didn't have to be true. And so I remember it was Pamela Brown, who actually had a clip from Ashish Jha, who was a great guy. I really liked Ashish Jha. He was head of the coronavirus response team for the White House, saying, need to get this, it's better. And so she shows that clip, and she looks at Paige, I'm on old Zoom, like on Zoom here, and she said, was he wrong? This is not the question you want to answer. You don't want to say anything about him. It doesn't have anything to do with him. You don't want anything that more than has to do with what I have to say. It's about the data. So I said, look, there's two studies just published in the Journal of Medicine that show this is worse, but it's better. And you feel terrible about that. And I got a lot of negative email from people, including people in the public health community, who said, you just can't predict the public health message. Of course you can. I think it's important to. I think it's important to hold everybody's feet to the fire. It's okay not to be right. It's okay not to get it right the first time. That's okay. It's expected. And I think at some level you do gain trust if you say, look, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's what we got wrong, and here's what we can do better at. Because it's a human endeavor, and human endeavors are invariably flawed.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think the more forgiving of these conspiracy theories is they always feared the government was going to overstep at any opportunity that they get to overstep, because that's the nature of government. It's also the nature of religion. It's just when somebody's in charge of a large group of people, you get some leaders that are phenomenal, you get some leaders that are mediocre, and you get some leaders that are evil. And you don't know till they'll do something that's evil. And so I think the school closures, the aggressive mandates with science just triggered all these people that were like, the secret sauce that makes America great is our freedom to disagree, our freedom to do what we want with our bodies within reason, and not allowing the government to ever get so big that they take those freedoms away. And the school closures and the mandates, it wasn't even just the governments. We've talked about this before, asking healthy 18-year-old boys to have 2, 3, 4, 5 shots of COVID in order to attend college. That's nonsense. There's no science behind that.
I agree. I wrote a Substack about exactly that. I didn't understand university mandates at that far into the pandemic. It didn't make sense.
And I think that's what triggered these people, the reasonable ones, not the extreme ones, but the reasonable ones were like, there has to be limits on government for things to be good.
Yeah.
And they weren't.
The young adults I've seen in the office, when there were no mandates, they would come in, they would get their vaccines, and they would be happy. Everybody was happy.
Where?
It's when they had the mandate.
Yeah. Now, last time you were on the podcast, you had the David Letterman impersonation. And now, what are the top takeaways to stop further spread?
Well, so right now, if you define pandemic as something that changes the way we live, work, or play, the pandemic's over. We go back, they're doing everything we normally do. You go to a Sixers game, there's 20,000 people, maskless, screaming in it's in the winter. Pandemic, as far as if you have that definition. But the virus is, if this virus is going to circulate for years, if not decades longer. So what to do? I guess here's what I would say. Just one practical piece of advice. I know we're at the end of your time, but here's my practical piece of advice. If you are in a high-risk group and you have respiratory symptoms, test yourself. And if you're positive for COVID, take Paxlovid early, because I think it is an underutilized drug. And I think that the notion of Paxlovid rebound is wrong. It was COVID rebound. There is no such thing as COVID as Paxlovid rebound. It's not a thing. It's like the Eagles defense. It's not a thing. And if you're not in a high risk group, I don't think you have to test yourself, but assume that you have or respiratory syncytial virus or influenza or COVID or even metapneumovirus or parainfluenza virus or any other panoply of winter respiratory viruses that still cause people to be hospitalized and still cause people to die. And if you can stay home, if you can't stay home, wear a mask, is what I would say. It's a practical way to try and stop spread. Because what I often hear from friends is like, I have a respiratory infection. My child has respiratory infection, but it's not COVID. So now I can go out and do what I normally do. Send my child to school with a respiratory infection because it's not COVID. Still, I think this presenteeism is what we see.
Where can the audience find your book?
It's on, I think, comes out February 13th, but it's on Amazon and which bookstores still exist. They haven't, but probably most people, Amazon or at Penguin, Random House. It's all those Books A Million, any of those websites. It's easily.
And the book's going to have a companion website?
Yeah, well, it's already had, since my website. So the Substacks that I have invariably talk about something to this and move forward. That'll be true too.
So they can read the book and then they can go to the Substack or the website. And I think you also have a YouTube offshoot of what you write on Substack.
Yeah, Vincent Racaniello, who does This Week in Virology and also does the clinical update with and he has the video version of my Substacks every week. He's great. You probably know him. He's a virologist at Columbia and just got interested later in his career about trying to communicate science to the public. And it's just a really good guy. You know.
Yeah, they're very nice interviews. We'll put that all in the show notes so the audience can follow all of that. Any other message you want to send to the general pediatricians across the country? And we do have people listen to us in Europe and Latin America.
Yeah, no, I think I hang in there. I think that you have especially been on the front lines. I've been on the back lines. So I think I have an enormous amount of respect for those people on the front lines who had to do this. Was one rough 4 years, and I think we have emerged strong with a high level of population. But I think we shouldn't get complacent that this virus is going away. To put it in perspective, this was an animal to human spillover event that occurred in the western section of the Hunan seafood market at the end of 2019. And we have 4 strains of human coronavirus that circulate that were all animal to human spillover. One of those viruses entered the human population in the late 1700s. Another entered the human population in the late 1800s. I think you can assume this virus is going to be with us for a while. It's going to continue mutating to be somewhat immune evasive for protection against mild disease. But I really am going to predict, and probably never should, because you're all wrong about this virus, but that it's really not going to mutate away from protection by T cells, which means I think it's never going to be so mutated that we have to start all over.
Thank you very much for everything you've done for society.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I always look I was such anticipation and joy to have you on the podcast, and how much this makes my life happy.
Thank you guys. And you guys are the ones who are trying to do the hard part, which is communicate science to the public. Not easy. And especially this.
Yes.
He is a rock star.
No, I'm not.
He's like one of the greats, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, all of them wrapped up into one.
Oh, you mean Dr. Offit?
Yes. Yes.
No.
Not you.
I thought you were going again that I'm famous.
No, not you, Dr. Offit.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys. Good luck.
I wanted to take a minute before we end the show today for a big ask. I would ask you to please go to the website for Ask the Experts. This is a wonderful program from Barbara Davis Center for Diabetes in Aurora, Colorado. The whole definition of what insulin-dependent diabetes, juvenile diabetes, type 1 diabetes, or autoimmune diabetes has changed. Please do your part to try to prevent DKA in children, as it has a long-lasting effect on their brains and their metabolic health. Thank you. Please take a minute of your time to visit our sponsors for this show, pcc.com and Ovis Practicum. They make this show possible by a generous contribution to the editing and production of the show. As you all know, I am a huge fan of the 59th Annual Pediatric Postgraduate Course, Practical Updates and Cutting-Edge Topics for Pediatricians, founded by Dr. Donald H. Altman. This year, the meeting will be held in Coral Gables, March 22 through 24 at the Lowe's Hotel. Make sure to visit their website and register and see Dr. Rogo and I at the CME. Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Pediatric Lounge. On the show notes, you will find links to our co-host and other important notes, as well as a timetable of the topics discussed today. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a great review, as it helps us greatly. In the meantime, we will see you next week. The Pediatric Lounge. The conversations are not intended as medical advice, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the host and the guest.